So, Farhad, we're going to be chatting briefly about how it's going over peak season. Obviously, we're managing a lot of performance accounts on behalf of a lot of retail brands across multiple sectors. And, we did some research probably just a few weeks ago about what we anticipated happening. What is it that we're seeing and it's taken you by surprise, or how are we using some of that learning in more real time to actually change some of the plans that we're putting together right now?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing I would say is it's not as soft as maybe we might have expected. There are obviously some people doing a little better, some people doing a little worse. There has been a little bit of a shift, I think, in terms of the depth of discounting that people were originally planning and are now sort of doing little test campaigns around. And my expectation is there is, for a lot of clients, a plan A and a plan B for Black Friday based on what they're sort of seeing on residual discounting. There is definitely a bit of a trend in some clients where stock is a bit more of an issue, where it looks like the performance is actually quite good. And so you are speculating whether that's being brought forward or not. And obviously we're in the middle of November, so it's quite hard to tell whether that stuff being moved forward or a general good trend for that particular client. But there is one in particular I think about where we know there are some stock challenges where the first couple of weeks of November performance is very good comparison to year on year. And we are sort of looking at that going, how much of that is about stock and availability and worries about that particular piece of interaction. We are seeing not a huge amount of movement in media costs yet, but it's the 15th of November, so I wouldn't necessarily expect to see them yet. But I think we're starting to see a lot more promotional activity go live in the next day or two, with a lot of people's Black Friday starting 10 days out, or a lot more starting 10 days out. So we're starting to see that I would expect to pick up over the next few days as we see that level of competition kind of increase underneath those pieces. But paid search CPCs up slightly, but not majorly. Social actually quite flat, and I would say that there is definitely more of a trend in not necessarily our clients full stop, but a lot of people being much more search heavy and trying to force DR results, which we both know isn't going to work that effectively over that time frame, and the short term of where it is. We're finding the types of clients that tend to do better in more recessionary environments like beauty, which always sort of holds up a little bit better, and because of the gifting bit, is doing a little bit better than some of the fashion retail stuff, which is in certain categories starting to find life a little harder. I think that's also partly that the weather's been quite warm, and so you've got some seasonal trend stuff that isn't helping, for a lot of those retailers that are into winter stock, where some of it isn't selling that well, and it's hard to understand whether that's economy or weather or both at this moment in time. And I think the weather's due to turn cold next week, so we'll get a better sort of steer in where we are. But for all the noise that's going on in the marketplace, I would say the overall picture at the moment is actually a little better than what we expected. The people that are down and would expect to be down are down far less than we thought they would be. And there are one or two that would have expected to be down that are actually +6%, +7%, +8% with strong demand. It is being driven by tactical promotion, and that's, there's no doubt that promotional strategy is probably the variable that's the most important part of getting the mix right and the right levels at this moment in time. And we have certainly seen in the first week or two where people have had their new customer offers at 10% or 15% off selected products, or even 20%. is not really necessarily cutting through, so having to be a bit deeper and a bit broader already, I would say, is probably the biggest trend that we're seeing. But I think what we saw was people go in with slightly more optimistic promotional plans than we would have sort of said they should have done, and certainly that we were saying a few months ago. And I think it's come to fruition already that for the price promotional stuff, the depth of discounting is going to need to be pretty strong to get there if you can make that sort of piece work. The only other thing I'd sort of put into the mix, and it's hard to tell again how true or not it is in terms of moving some sales forwards, obviously all the Royal Mail strikes, and we've obviously got a bunch of rail strikes which are going to stop people from necessarily traveling and buying. So the environmental stuff that's out there that might be helpful for particularly digital sales, it's hard to tell how much of that's really having an impact, and you'll never really know. But yes, Jim, overall sentiment is so far so good, better than expected. For some people, way better than expected. Long may it continue.
I was going to say, I think there was obviously nervousness about it, and it's good to hear that actually it's not panning out to be the nightmare that perhaps we thought it might be. But I think one of the early signs that we were concerned was obviously the performance over the recent Amazon Prime Day in October wasn't as good as we'd hoped, which we were concerned about going into peak.
Yeah, I mean that's been very true, and I think we found it, and actually not just us, everyone found that Amazon Prime Day was not at the level that was previously experienced, and I do wonder whether it came a little bit early. I am still a bit cautious with, you look at all the trend data we were looking at about Black Friday being moved further and further forwards over the last few years, whether actually what we're seeing is a pattern of that creeping forward, and the handful of days around Black Friday and that weekend actually being weaker, so you end up with a weaker picture overall. So it's hard to assess when you're sort of in the middle of those things. And I would say if that turns out to be true, then what people are taking up front will not compensate for what the loss at the back end might actually look like. But it's a moving beast, and I think we've already seen clients that have launched certain things that haven't really worked and revisited it within a day or two, push something slightly different. We're seeing a lot of success on social with around UGC content rather than just necessarily brand content, which particularly for TikTok and even Instagram, there are one or two outliers that are showing that creative cut through is a massive thing that makes a big difference, and that's an area where I think there's weaknesses for a number of people, including for some of our clients, in terms of the assets that they've got to help with those particular things. But yeah, like I sort of said, so far better than expected. But the hard bit about media cost increase in particular and being driven forwards, we're probably a week away.
And we have the World Cup coming up as well.
Yeah, and we've got the World Cup, which is something of an unknown, and I think the one thing we have seen with a lot of clients is that certainly the testing around their own CRM and their own databases is going earlier than some of the external stuff. So this hybrid approach where our core customers and our core advocates are getting stuff that's discounted a bit earlier than we're necessarily making available to everyone. So seeing that, and sometimes a good 2 or 3 days difference in that sort of mix, which is slightly different from what we've seen before. But I also think part of that's being used to understand whether the promotion I've got is strong enough before I decide to launch it, and a little bit of testing on the best segment of customer data, because if you can't get that to perform at that sort of discount, then you're not getting the rest of it to perform externally. So I think there's definitely a few more tactical things like that are happening this year in terms of trying to get a better understanding of how hard do I need to go and how do I segment some of that data, or do little tests on certain things to give me a bit of a flavor about whether I've got the right strategy and whether I need to adapt it to plan B quite early on. And I expect we're going to see, quite a lot of adaptations to plan Bs over the sort of weekend of Black Friday anyway.
Yeah, so it's the 15th now. We're 11 days away from Black Friday, similar sort of to the start of the World Cup as well. So I think what we'll do, we'll come back and have another chat about this probably towards the end of next week and see if anything's changed and is worth sharing, and then we'll probably catch up again after Black Friday. So let's have a few chats and share our experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem.
Okay, thank you, Farhad.
Cool, cheers, mate.